Join us for the Criterion Institute podcast as Joy Anderson, a global thought leader in business and social change, leads us through a series of discussions, interviews, frameworks, rants, and reframes that will help you better understand how to use finance as a tool for transformative systems change.
I am Joy Anderson, and this is the Criterion Institute podcast. Today includes a conversation I recorded a while back between my father and I, discussing the impact of family sayings on our perception of life, money, and investments. My father, an influential theologian, explains how family sayings form a mythology that shapes our worldview and attitudes towards various aspects of life, including money and generosity. We look at how these sayings influence our decisions and interactions, both personally and professionally. These inherited beliefs often dictate how individuals approach money and investments, affecting their willingness to take risks or prioritize self-sufficiency. I begin the episode with some insights from my recent travels in Kenya and Ghana, noting the frequent and welcoming greetings from locals, notably, "You are welcome." I reflect on this phrase, usually what I'm accustomed to say after someone says thank you, is used proactively in these countries, emphasizing hospitality and creating a remarkable sense of belonging. Then the conversation with my father highlights the importance of understanding deep-rooted beliefs when considering investments and partnerships, suggesting that personal family sayings can play a crucial role in shaping family behaviors and decisions. A third segment in this episode is a personal reflection on a phrase I use often: welcoming the stranger, knowing the stranger will change you. This is Criterion's definition of one of our core values of hospitality. And I reflect on how I've experienced that phrase in the last week, both with a dear friend who needed to feel welcomed as a stranger and my own reactions to the current political tenor. Ultimately, I hope this episode encourages you to reflect on your own cultural and familial sayings and how they might influence your approach to money and social change. Enjoy. Over the last few weeks, I've been traveling between Kenya and now Ghana, and one thing has struck me, which is that when you sit down, when you walk into a restaurant, when you get into a cab, the first thing that somebody says to you is "you are welcome." You are constantly being welcomed. And it's just a phrase, right? That, Jambo sana, whatever the exchange is that says we are greeting each other. And those are profound moments as you are greeted so often in a strange country, especially in the context of a hotel or places where you're constantly encountering different people. But this struck me as a profound reversal of the English phrasing, which is "you're welcome" comes in response to somebody saying thank you. And so I looked this up because I was trying to figure out, I thought about it. I thought, it doesn't actually make very much sense to say "you're welcome" in response to thank you. You're welcome to the thing that I just did to you or did for you. Or actually, in snarky ways, we would say you're welcome if somebody forgot to say thank you, right? It's actually saying you're welcome first is often a sign that you're wanting somebody else to say thank you. So I found this interchange delightful to be welcomed over and over and over again. Before you do anything, before you say anything, you are welcomed. That is hospitality. So I offered an invitation to my father, who an influential theologian, to reflect with me on some of the big ideas that have shaped my thinking. So welcome, Dad.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So, one of the realities of growing up was that I was in a family with a father who taught about the family professionally. And
Right.
so that was always fun to be the object of stories in books and courses.
Right.
So thanks for that. That was great.
Well,
But
you're very welcome.
But one of the things that was always a sort of an ongoing refrain through all of through your work and talking about the family was thinking about the role of family sayings. Want to start with that?
Well, yeah, I've got to thinking about family sayings because I came away with the conviction after several years of teaching that every family has its own mythology. It has its own way of thinking about itself. We're a adventuresome family. We are a hardworking family. We're a family that when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's us. And then I began to think about how do we get to those mythologies? How do we get to them? Well, we get to them largely by sayings. And I suppose I was also influenced by the fact that I as you will know well, Joy, the chief sin in my family growing up was being proud. And my father would say, you know, pride.
The higher.
Oh, no! I get to
the
tell that
more.
one. No. But my father would say, "Pride goes before the fall," and then he would say something in Latin, "Sic transit gloria mundi," which means "So passes the glory of this world." And he would say that whenever some big, powerful person would fall. And then my mother had written something in Swedish. And I finally tricked her into translating it. And it said, "The higher the monkey is in the tree, the more his ass is exposed." Now, that's a story, that's a saying that then helped me understand my life and helped me understand a whole lot of things about my life, which got me then into helping other people think about their families and the power of their families through thinking about sayings. And along the way, I began also to think about how these sayings shape and form what the psychologist Jerome Frank once called an assumptive world, which is how we organize our life, how we think about life, how we think about the world. And if you believe that for every bone there are at least 6 dogs, if that's a saying from your family, then you're likely to come away feeling like the world is a kind of dog eat dog place and you got to get there and beat the next guy. Or if you came from a family in which the saying was, have you ever seen a hearse with a U-Haul trailer? Well, probably not. And obviously then amassing possessions is not something you would do. So that these sayings have the power to shape how we think about life, how we think about money, how we think about being generous, how we think about what we do or don't do. And then there are sayings that are really sort of destabilizing. I mean, a wet bird never flies alone at night. Well, wet birds don't fly, nor do birds fly alone. It means absolutely nothing. But this one I think that came. I was thinking about last night. Talk is cheap, but it takes money to buy whiskey. Well, how? That one or if you can't pay cash for it, you don't need it. So
Okay.
all of these things shape a worldview that we have that then will influence how we approach making choices in our lives, how we approach decision making about investment.
Right. And
Oh,
that's what's so important. I mean, as we encounter people we're trying to shape how they think about investments and finance and money and how all that connects to social change. Often, we're encountering people who will always be deeply, uh, deep rooted understandings of how money works, how it should work, their relation to that.
right.
And often that comes from the family. I remember teaching a course once where we were working on people thinking about new ways to invest their money. And the sort of family experiences of one of the women in the class made her unable to participate. She simply stepped out of the conversation and finally revealed that this was because her family had had two bankruptcies and she personally had then had a
Right.
bankruptcy, and the conversation about violence, the conversation about money, was essentially a violent conversation for her, and that's how she saw it.
Yep.
But that all ties back. Some of that really comes from how do we see our experience with money, how do we make sense of it, and we do
Right.
that through these sayings.
Yeah. Well, they certainly shape. They certainly shape a disposition or an attitude or a and I think sometimes these sayings linger on. I mean, people listening to this podcast may want to just think about your own family sayings and how they shaped us. Some of them may not, but if you came from a family in which your father always said you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it square dance, oh well, that means absolutely nothing, except you can't control everything.
Hmm.
You can lead a horse to water. You can do that much, but you can't make it square dance. Well, then you gotta think about how far do I go in controlling things that go on in my life. So sayings just have a wonderful kind of, there's the big word, hermeneutic, and they have a way of interpreting
Hmm.
how we see things. You can't sit on the hill and enjoy the breeze if you don't own the hill.
Hmm.
Well, now that's going to shape how you approach money.
Right. Right.
If your family said it only costs a little more to go first class. Oh, that's a different kind of perspective than if you can buy a sailboat for 10 cents and you don't need it, it's no bargain. And I often used to explore with students how people don't do a little inventory of the family sayings you come from uh, before you get married or before you fall in love and before you decide to marry, because sometimes there are very, very clear differences.
We should do the same thing with business partners.
Well, I think
Actually,
that would be true. That would be very
share your family sayings and figure out whether or
yeah,
not you should actually be in
yeah,
business together.
yeah. Right. Or yeah, this probably going to get to another theme we may talk about another time, but this is somebody you knew because you dated his son. But Peter Chessett's mother, who was 92 when they took her to a retirement home, said, "I want to go in the kitchen and get a job washing dishes in the kitchen because every tub must stand on its own bottom." Every tub must stand on its own bottom. Well, that's absolutely about independence and self-sufficiency. And if you have that kind of saying, um, then you're not likely to take risks to invest something in the
Hmm.
future where you're not sure that you can do it all by yourself.
Right. Right. Any other favorites in this list?
Um. Uh. Oh, an empty wagon makes the most noise.
Huh.
Um,
An empty wagon makes the most noise. Does
I
that
don't.
mean we're going together?
Yeah, well, it means that if you have nothing inside if you're kind of the empty wagons, you kind of fill up a wagon. You fill up yourselves. Empty wagon. Empty people make the most noise.
Gotcha.
But that's maybe not exactly right. But the final thought is all of us have an internalized view of the world, an internalized view of money, um, and those at work, and those views usually have partially come from our families of origin, and they shape how we will invest in using money to change the world.
Yep, 100%. Well, thanks so much. One of Criterion's core values is hospitality. The definition we put out of hospitality, I've often found challenging in good ways. The definition we use is to welcome the stranger, knowing the stranger will change you. The intent behind this phrase, it's an ancient definition of hospitality. The intent behind it, at least in the context of Criterion, is to push away from the performance of hospitality, away from, did we put the dinner napkins out? Did we look good to people? Too often I feel like the process of hosting becomes about the hosts and how they want to be seen. And so this focus on the stranger, this focus on unexpected strangers and where things might head if you welcome those unexpected strangers has taught me so often to remember that I don't know what everybody needs and that I need to ask and to listen and to pause and to really see whether or not people feel welcome. Just this last week, a dear friend of mine was traveling, and I had invited her to join me, and she just kept reminding me that she was a stranger in the land I was bringing her to, and that I needed to slow down and get her a taxi and make sure she knew how to get around, make sure she knew she had friends. And at some point in the middle of the meeting, she turned to me and said, I am not in trauma. Normally, by this point in a meeting, I would feel trauma because I have lived through so much. Rather, I am here, fully engaged with friends. So the juxtaposition of that experience of welcoming a friend, but knowing that she's a stranger to the land in which she is coming, and these are not pathways that she walks easily. I've been thinking about that intimacy in the context of how I am experiencing the political elections. So I am recording this a few days after Biden's first presidential debate. And this election period in 2024 is not going to be fun. And I brace myself. I don't want to overhear conversations at the table next to me in a dining room for fear that it's the politics that makes me nauseous. I have so many friends who are thinking about leaving the United States depending on the direction of the election. And so I think about this fear, right? I fear an accidental. I live in a rural area. I fear the accidental encounter of somebody I thought was a friend whose politics I may learn I abhor. And so I think about this phrase, welcome the stranger, knowing the stranger will change you. And I don't want to be changed. I don't want to meet strangers. I want to be protected from the unknown and hang out with people who think like me. The phrase is not, though, welcome the ideology, so the ideology might change you. I am clear that our pat phrases, our ways of thinking, our slogans, our political ideologies, however important they are to the political fight that we're in the midst of, do not help us see each other as people. And so I will try to stay open, even in times when that seems perilous. Because in the end, it's that openness that is what I'm fighting for. In the end, that's the political system, that's the social system, that's the cultural system that I want to be part of. And that means sometimes we will be encountering strangers who we don't yet know how to understand. But even in the midst of a fight, I want to keep trying.
To learn more about our work, visit us at criterioninstitute.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews help our podcast reach a wider audience. Thanks for listening.